play.
Swim so free.
The Capitol Hill to
Soccer bopper.
What's up, everybody? This is Tune In Next Week, episode number 21. And this is Tune In Next Week, the podcast where we break apart TV shows from the post-baby boom era for you wonderful, fantastic, and fine, wonderfully fine, fantastic people. And speaking of wonderfully fine, fantastic people, I want to give a quick shout-out to my guest host today, Mr. Maurice. What's up, man?
How you doing?
How you doing? Yeah, we have Brian is out. I don't know what he's doing actually, but he is doing something. So I've got
not as much fun as doing this.
That's right. Absolutely. So Maurice, thanks for jumping in, man. We're happy to have you back.
I'm excited to be here, and when you played that theme song, oh my goodness, it just always I get so excited about it.
Me too, man. This is seriously one of my all-time favorite shows. You know, there's certain theme songs that when I hear them, it's like I just stop everything and, you know, if I can sit down and watch it, I'm going to watch it, man, because I just, you know, I love that. I love it. You know, I hear this theme song, I hear like the Frasier theme song, Airwolf, you know, any of those shows, I'm just like, oh, nope, I'm going to watch it. You know, so great. But this is episode 21, and we are revisiting. If you couldn't tell from the all too familiar and iconic theme song, we are revisiting Knight Rider. And Knight Rider, for those who may not know, Knight Rider was our very first episode of Tune In Next Week. So this is episode 21. Here we are, 20 episodes later. We are revisiting our very first episode of Knight Rider. But we are using a different episode of the show. We are going to be doing. Do you remember the name of the episode that we are doing?
Junkyard Dog.
That's right, Junkyard Dog, and this was from season 3. It is episode 14 of Knight Rider. Originally aired on February 3rd, 1985. So Knight Rider went on for 4 seasons, 4 years, 1982 to 1986. Had 90 episodes. And if you want to watch Knight Rider on the interwebs there, you can catch it on iTunes for purchase, which I highly recommend. I think they might even be in high def now. They might have been remastered in high def. Or you can get them on Amazon Video. I checked on Hulu and Netflix. They are not available, which is kind of weird.
I like the iTunes store.
Shameless plug.
I'm actually trying to look it up right now as we speak.
Okay, cool. And while you're doing that, actually, I'm going to take care of a couple other plugs and a little segment we like to call business. So as far as plugs here, I want to just quickly plug JB Recording. That is the recording studio that we use for recording these wonderful podcasts for you. You can visit www.jbrecording.com for any of your voiceover or music production needs. We are on the podcast here, Tune In Next Week. We are on Twitter at TuneIn_Next Week. You can find us on SoundCloud as well, TuneIn_Next Week, and Instagram, TuneIn_Next Week. You can also get us on the TuneIn app, which is a great app for listening to internet radio. And you can just do a search for us on there, Tune In Next Week. We are there on TuneIn. And also, our main base of operations there is on Tumblr, and that's tunein-nextweek.tumblr.com, where you can see pictures and see other postings and other shenanigans that are going on. Speaking of shenanigans, we do have a live episode coming up on Mother's Day, Sunday, May 8th, I believe it is. So definitely keep a look out on Twitter for that. We're going to be posting more information, so follow us on Twitter at TuneIn_Next Week. So that is the business, and what do you say we jump into the episode, Maurice?
Absolutely. Actually, let's talk about how we chose this episode.
Absolutely. So yeah, so originally when I came to you about kind of jumping in and co-hosting, I said, hey, let's do an episode of Knight Rider. We will revisit Knight Rider, and when I asked you which episode you wanted to do, what did you tell me?
I wanted to see an episode that really showcased the features of KITT. I mean, I think KITT was way ahead of its time, especially in the 80s. I mean, now we have, Siri and Cortana and whatever other, AI there is. And
Sure.
It was just, its features, being
Right.
able to showcase all those capabilities we only dreamt of, at that time. So I was really excited to see this particular episode.
Absolutely, and you also said you specifically wanted, I think you said season 1 or 2, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we stretched a little because we did season 3. I hope that's okay. But but no, we were talking about we were talking about possibly doing the Goliath episodes, which is beginning of season 2 and kind of midway through season 2. But I think this one that we picked, Junkyard Dog, was a little bit more. I think there's a little bit more of a meaning that we can kind of take away from that. I think there's a little bit more to it than just what happens in Goliath. And I don't want to spoil anything, so those of you that may not have seen the Goliath episodes, season 2, episode 1 and 2, and I believe, I could be wrong, but it's going to be like season 1, episode 15, 16, Goliath Returns. Check them out. They're great episodes in the series. But this one here, season 3, episode 14, Junkyard Dog. I'm going to go ahead and read the plot synopsis here. So basically, while on the trail of toxic polluter Acid John Birock, KITT ends up in a pit filled with acid and is all but destroyed. The car has to be rebuilt from scratch by the original design team. Once reassembled, the world's most sophisticated car appears to have lost its nerves. When you first saw this happen, when you first saw KITT get dunked, and we're going to talk about what happened really, but what did you think about when you saw that, or how did that hit you?
It hit me actually hard, and it wasn't so much it going into that acid pit,
Right?
but mostly KITT yelling for help. Anyone who yells for help, I don't know, it puts me in a very bad place actually.
Right, and you being someone that is so sort of like close with technology, that had to be kind of tough to watch, right?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and as someone that's seen that episode a number of times, I mean, I know that it's obviously got a positive outcome and everything, but it's still really tough to see that scene, But let's jump into the episode, and we'll talk a little more about that when we get to it. So, one of my favorite things about Knight Rider, they just start right away with that iconic theme song. There's no little intro. Sometimes they'll do the little preview section, which I'm not a fan of. I don't really want to see the Cliff Notes versions of the episode before I start the episode. How do you feel about those little things? Do you like seeing sort of like the episode in a minute and a half and then the intro? Like, how do you feel about that?
So that's a great question, because I'm one of those who does not like spoilers.
Yeah,
at all.
For those who don't know, if I want to tell Maurice about something, I can start telling him about like a show I watched or a movie I watched. I'll get about a sentence into it, and then he'll just put his hand up and go, "Don't spoil it."
Yep, I am very against
hate spoilers.
I strongly dislike them. However, with Knight Rider, it's a special type of situation actually.
Yeah.
Because I would always see that little preview,
right,
as I was growing up, but it wouldn't ruin the episode for me. It would. I looked at it as a trailer,
right,
that did have certain scenes that were too revealing, but I think at that time, at that point in time,
it wasn't as big of a deal.
It wasn't a big of a deal because I was more excited to see how it got there, and I wanted to see KITT in action.
Yep. Okay, no, that's cool. And with this, I kind of told you not to look at it because I didn't want you to see KITT out of action.
Mm-hmm.
Because so that you could see the episode from a objective,
right,
standpoint. So, cool. So we start out, and the first thing we see is basically just some B-roll footage and just like footage of some animals roaming free on the plains, and it looked really nice. Probably somewhere in the middle of Iowa or something, and horses running around.
And the bunny.
The bunnies were so helpless.
I know.
you know. And then next thing we know, and the music is so pleasant, and you know, it's just really setting the mood. Like, oh, this is really pretty. And then the music just takes a turn for the worse, and you get in for like the choo choo choo, you know, and all the evil drums and all that stuff that Don Peake is famous for. Don Peake is the guy that scored. He wrote the music for Knight Rider. But is it Don Peake or Stu Phillips? Actually, I think it might have been both. Never mind. Anyway, the guy that scored it, where he does that. Like, the music is almost always telling a lot in these types of situations, because it starts out with this really pleasant music, and then it just changes to this do do do, you know, and you see this beat up old truck start driving down the road, and then what happens? What does the guy do?
He pulls this lever, and then stuff starts coming out from that pipe on the back of the truck.
Exactly. So which we basically determined that this is some guy who is dispensing toxic waste.
At first, I thought he was dispensing water, and he was watering the grass on the side of the road.
Yeah, that would have been completely innocuous, but of course we wouldn't have an entire episode about Knight Rider if a guy was just watering plants.
But then I saw the bunny.
What happened to the bunny?
The bunny was just laying there, just spread out on the grass.
Right. So obviously, and the what I thought was kind of clever was they made it obvious in these sort of like opening shots of all the animals in the fray. They showed, you know, the bunnies and the cows and the horses grazing, because then after this truck drove by, the next shots were showing like the cows and the horses dead. So it was a little morbid, but obviously we know that this truck was not dumping water.
Nope.
You know, which is pretty unfortunate. But so the next thing we know, Michael's driving along, and he gets a phone call from Devin. Now, I've always found this just ridiculous, because, you know, nowadays in 2016 we have Skype and FaceTime, and we have all this, you know, video calling, which the quality is very good, but it's never crystal clear. In 1985, Michael's getting video calls that are crystal clear in his car.
Well, they're 480p.
Well, right, you know, but still, you know, he has 2 CRT monitors in his car that he's driving along with, and he's getting crystal clear video as if a camera was directly connected by a 7,000-mile long cable. You know, the quality should have. I just think the quality is a little too good.
But KITT's just too good.
I mean, of course, you know, the one thing Brian and I always say is, you know, we suspend disbelief, you know, and like for the purpose of what we're doing here, we're, you know, we can be nitpicky on things, or we can just kind of let them go. But, you know, either way, Michael gets this, you know, crystal clear video call from Devin, and Devin is basically saying, hey, I need you to look into this guy Acid John Birock, because he is he's causing some trouble.
Big trouble.
That's right. And they're basically looking for a way to you know, kind of to nail him. So Michael says, okay, well, hey, I'll be right there at the semi pretty soon. So Devin says, okay, Bonnie's going to fill you in when you get there. So, you know, one thing I was going to ask you, because you know how in all these episodes of Knight Rider, there'll be some footage of just Michael and KITT driving along, but doesn't it always look like they're driving really fast? But even when they're not necessarily going anywhere specific, like when they're just cruising, doesn't it appear like they're driving really fast?
Oh, absolutely. He loves to speed.
Right, but I just wonder, do they ever get pulled over for speeding?
It's a good question. With such a cool license plate like that, you know, Knight, I don't know.
That, and, you know, he's technically not a cop, and he's not like FBI, he's not CIA, you know, he works for like this non-profit law organization. I don't know, I just kind of wondered why that was the deal. You know, why
Well, he's also in very remote regions. Like, you know, it's always like you see mountains on both sides, and you know.
Yeah, but I mean, even like driving around windy roads like outside city limits, seems like he's always going really fast.
Actually, I think I know why. Because KITT knows if somebody's scanning him with a radar gun.
This is true. We are back at the semi, and Michael and Bonnie are looking at some stock footage of Acid John Birock at work, and just nasty stuff.
Terrible things.
Yeah, he's, you know, basically his people are, you know, spray painting over things that say hazardous materials, and they have this big pit there which is obviously going to come into play a little bit later on. But, I mean, that's just... I mean, is this real? Do you think there are things like this around where there's pits of acid?
I think there were these things actually back in that time period, and I think this episode, a common theme with Knight Rider was that it would present certain current events, you know, certain things that they wanted to make people aware of, and I think this is one of those episodes that was meant to show people that there were a lot of factories that would just not care and dump anything anywhere.
Right.
And I think it was a big thing, you know, with landfills and stuff like that in the 80s.
Yeah. I know landfills were a thing, but I never knew if acid pits were a thing.
I think just waste in general, toxic waste.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, in my hometown, back in New Jersey, we had a chromium plant.
Okay.
That would just leak into the ground. So toxic waste was a big thing actually in my town. And
oh wow.
So it was a big thing back then.
Interesting. But hopefully, you know, if there were any of those acid pits, they're certainly gone from there. But you know, Bonnie and Michael are talking about how they're going to nail Birock and nail him for what he's doing. So Michael says, "Okay, well, hey, I'm going to hit the road and you know, I'm gonna do my own investigation and see what I can find." And you know, right then and there, he starts talking to KITT about, you know, hey, can you scan the road for me? KITT's looking around. He says, yeah, this KITT's picking up you know, what's on the road, and it's clearly acidic and clearly, you know, really bad.
Oh yeah, let's talk about his scanning capabilities.
Oh yeah,
you can see the molecule on the CRT monitor. That was amazing. He's just so good.
Oh, absolutely. So then Michael pulls over because he sees a damsel in distress. So, you know, whenever he sees a lady who needs help, he's, you know, gonna be the knight in shining black Trans Am. But he pulls over and offers to help this wildlife photographer that I guess she saw all the animals that were dead along the road that have been grazing on this hazardously sprayed
acid
foliage. Yeah, and he says, hey, what's going on? And she says, well, you know, there's nothing we can do because these animals are dead.
Actually, she says there's nothing you can do.
Right.
She was a little abrupt in the beginning.
Yeah, nothing she could do either. But, you know, she says, hey, I want to see if I can take this goat to the vet. And I just kind of, one thing I noticed, and I guess this is just little details that I pick up on or that stick out to me, but the goat was making a noise, but he was making the exact same noise over and over again, which is basically just the audio people playing a sample of a goat bleeding. Meh, meh, meh. It was the same exact thing. You know, I've heard dogs bark, and when they bark repeatedly, it's never the exact same. You know? So I just found that was a distraction for me. I mean, it's such a stupid minor thing, but sometimes I notice these stupid things. Yeah. Meh. 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 It's like some dude in the audio booth just hitting let's make the goat bleed again. Meh. 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 So, I don't know. I would have at least taken like 2 or 3 goat bleats and, you know, break them up a little bit, but whatever. Okay, so Michael helps her by loading the goat into her van so she can take it to the vet. And then Michael and KITT show up at one of Birock's dump sites. And then what happens? Michael decides to break in.
Yes. He breaks in, and, first, he drives very softly with the headlights off. This is at night now.
Right.
And then he jumps over that barbed wire fence. I mean, the barbed wire didn't even faze him. Like,
no.
You know, what was the point of having a barbed wire type of fence?
I mean, honestly, looks.
Okay, all right. It's supposed to look dangerous to deter him from doing that. Okay, anyway.
But of course, that would never have stopped Michael Knight.
Of course. So he jumps over. He goes into the office that KITT has shown him on the map layout. Because KITT has all blueprints to all, you know, buildings.
Every building.
Of course.
Yeah.
And then
how much hard drive space would that take, honestly? I mean, like, we're terabytes.
Well, they were very low quality pictures.
Okay, but still, I mean, he has blueprints to every building.
Well, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he grabs them on demand, or maybe Devin or Bonnie uploaded it to him.
Right, because in other episodes, there are times where they say, we're sending information to KITT, so
exactly.
Maybe... Okay,
yeah.
So he doesn't have like a 6 exabyte hard drive in his
No,
trunk.
I think he's downloading it on demand using 1G.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see, 82, that would have been amps technology, which is analog. Yeah, slower than 1G.
So for those of you listening to our podcast on like your iPhone or your Android, you're running LTE, which is it's far beyond 4G. This is very ancient. Mm-hmm. So he breaks in, he gets into the office, he's looking around, and he gets KITT to remotely open up the lock.
Yeah, let's talk about this remotely open up a combination lock. So
yeah, because before he went in there, he said to KITT, hey, give me a rundown on the security. And KITT's like, oh, it's a Model XYZ safe, and it's a Model XYZ combination lock. And Mike's like, oh. Michael goes, oh, we have our work cut out for us, as if it's going to be a challenge. The challenge is him going, hey, KITT, open this for me.
Yes.
And it just does it. He just does it. So
the question is, was it that they wanted to leave out the real details? Did he put a stethoscope and then KITT listened, and then KITT was like, oh, click, and then because you saw the combination lock on the CRT screen as KITT was turning,
Right. Right. No, and it's interesting because in some episodes, KITT will tell Michael, go 3 clicks to the left, okay, 2 clicks to the right. But in this one, KITT just opens it.
Yeah.
And one must wonder by what means of technology is he doing this? And again, we know KITT's badass. That's just not a matter of question. But from a technological standpoint, how is KITT doing this?
I think they just skipped the whole scene. There was a stethoscope. There were the clicks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, Michael probably pulled out some equipment to, like infrared look through the mechanism of the lock to line up the thing. They just cut all that out because that was irrelevant.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, okay, so he opens it up, and of course they find the jackpot document, which Michael then has KITT record by way of his watch. And again, this is 2016. We have FaceTime and everything. We don't even have video calling on our watches, but Michael has a crystal clear, high definition, 480p, video transmission from his watch to KITT. Again, very, 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 very ahead of its time.
Very.
30 years ahead of its time.
Well, then again, the foundation is a law, it's kind of like this nonprofit law organization. Right. They have a lot of fancy toys, like KITT.
They do. Yeah, they do, for sure. But, this is 30 years ahead of its time.
Yeah.
It's just always is going to be amazing to me. So then something happens outside. There's a little bit of a commotion outside, and our photographer lady is back. Now, at some point, they do mention what her name is, but I didn't catch it until close to the end of the show, so I just always refer to her as photographer lady.
I still don't know her name, actually.
It's Fran.
Fran?
Fran, apparently. But for all intents and purposes, in my mind, she's photographer lady.
Actually, let's take a step back. Actually, now that you mentioned photographer lady and Fran, she had such a stereotypical '80s look. Like it was good. It was very refreshing. I love the '80s. The '80s is one of my favorite periods.
Heck yeah, definitely.
And you had the hairstyle. You had the wavy hair. All kind
the
of
big poof, and then the men in their mullets.
Sure. Yes.
Business in the front, party in the back.
They all have the same, look, and I like it. It's very, very 80s. You can tell.
Oh yeah. This show, especially in this aired in 1985, so right smack in the middle of that.
You had the clothing, very pastel color type of thing.
Oh yeah.
With a lot of little, wavy things on their vests and stuff, sweaters.
And of course, don't forget Michael Knight and his leather jacket.
Yes, of course.
His iconic leather jacket.
Yes, and collared shirt, always.
Yes. Because he had to pop the collar,
Yep.
But, so...
Oh, and his hairdo. His hair, amazing.
Oh, yeah. You can't hassle a Hoff.
Yes.
So now he finds this document. All hell breaks loose outside because photographer lady is caught snooping around. So Michael runs to his aide, says, hey, KITT, I need you. KITT comes barreling in like a bat out of hell. Now, what I don't understand is, at this point, KITT corners 2 of the goons, and, it stops them from going to attack Michael. Michael's having a fist fight with somebody else. And then somebody knew to go get the forklift. You know, like I wonder what somebody thought really quickly. You know what I mean? Because these people didn't know Michael Knight going into this. You know, they didn't know that Michael Knight was going to be coming for them, or they didn't know about the Foundation or anything like that. But KITT came barreling in, and somebody thought really quickly, hey, there's a car that's coming at us. Let me go get the forklift and pick up the car. You know, that's a little odd to me. Because these people are just regular, average Joe blue-collar people. Somebody was really smart there.
Or the forklift wasn't intentionally or initially to get KITT. It was initially to run someone over, maybe even Michael.
Possibly.
The car just happened to be there. It's like, let's lift up the car.
Right, exactly. So, and I also just find it ridiculous, and again, this is a plot point, but, you know, what they do with the car, if somebody were actually driving KITT, would certainly kill them. So they're just going to murder somebody for trespassing. You know, that's a nasty way to deal with somebody, but it's also a sure way to land yourself in prison. Mm-hmm. You know, but, you know, kind of based on what we talked about before, they, you know, KITT corners those guys, and then somebody comes with the forklift, picks KITT up, and drops KITT into the acid pit.
Well, wait, before he drops him, KITT calls for Michael.
Oh, yeah. He's like, Michael, come get me. I'm
help!
Help me.
Help!
And Michael's like, uh-oh.
Michael, help! Michael, help! Michael.
So now KITT gets dropped in the acid pit, and now with a reenactment of KITT dying in the acid pit, ladies and gentlemen, Maurice.
Michael.
As KITT sinks into the acidic pool,
and Michael comes running.
Right, and and you can tell there's clearly shots of a scale model of KITT dunking into a tiny thing. You know?
Oh my goodness! It reminds me of my Hot Wheels, you know, Pontiac Trans Am that I had.
Yeah,
it's actually that's what it looked like. They just put that into like this, you know, thick type of syrup thing that looked like the acid.
Yeah, I mean,
pit.
like you could tell in the production if you watch this episode during the sinking scene, you can see where real KITT, you know, jumps in there, and then they cut to a scene of a scale model sinking into goo, you know, with the audio of Michael going, "Kill, buddy, hey KITT, I'll come get you," you know. So like that was a little tacky in my opinion.
It was like
you know,
it was basically no KITT and then Hot Wheels.
yeah, that I took a little bit of an issue with that.
I did, but you know something again. It was the '80s. Technology wasn't, you know that.
But if they have the technology and the capability to simulate molecules on a CRT screen inside a car and have a car drive itself and turbo boost over things and drive through buildings, they can't simulate a car sinking and dying in an acid pit correctly?
If you wanted stick figures, then yes.
I don't know.
But they also did not want to waste a car getting all mudded up, you know.
Well, I have an issue with that too, because, you know, according to the plot and according to the storyline, this is an acid pit. Mm-hmm. All right. So KITT falls into the acid. KITT gets dunked in the acid pit, and then Michael and the photographer lady make a break for it. Then you go to commercial. Now, when we come back from commercial, we're seeing a tow truck towing KITT out of the acid pit. This raises some questions. Number one, how did the towing person latch onto KITT in the first place? He would have had to have put his hands under that acid pit or swim in there to hook onto KITT. That's number one. Number two, it seemed awfully specific which parts of KITT were melted and which parts seemed to be completely fine. Like, he had all 4 tires. The shell was fine, but there was no inside. You know, like the outer shell, the outer like you know,
chassis.
The body and the chassis were like almost completely fine. The paint had been chipped off, but like the under shell was fine. So I guess this leads us to believe the entire car was made of steel.
Pretty much, except for the circuitry.
Right. But like everything on the inside, all the all of the
leather seats.
No, the cloth seats and the guts and the computers and all that stuff was completely gone. So, I would have thought that the acid would have eaten away. Like the car would have looked less like a car, and the tires would have been eaten away, and the rims would have been gone. Like, it seemed too perfect of a car. You know what I mean?
All right, so let me
The conditions seem too good.
Let me try to defend
for the
this.
acid bath.
So remember,
Go
it has that coating, that layer that's bulletproof.
Yeah, the molecular bonded shell.
Maybe
sure.
that gives it some immunities against acid.
That would be the only explanation. No, I mean you're absolutely right. That and to those that are really to those that really are into the show, that may be the explanation to this. That the molecular bonded shell is able to protect certain aspects of the car, and I guess maybe because later on you find out when Bonnie and Michael kind of get KITT back to the semi, and they start evaluating kind of what he's looking like. Bonnie says all but only a few of his major components are completely trashed. So maybe his like core CPU or something is protected by this shell.
That's a possibility because the memories were those memories were saved
right
somewhere.
Right. So
a backup, actually. It sounded like there was a backup, and you saw a computer when they went back, into the garage or whatever that was.
Yeah. So definitely good possibilities there. But Bonnie and Michael take KITT back to the semi, and they pretty much assess that he's just about gone. And Michael's like, well, how long will it take to repair him? And Bonnie's like, we can't repair him. We have to rebuild him. And I'm amazed they did this all in one episode. Because I would have thought, because like in Goliath, a similar situation happened, and they had to pretty much rebuild him there, but that was a 2-part episode. So I kind of found that interesting.
So this actually brings up a good thing.
Yeah.
You always should have a backup.
Yes. So little public service announcement here. Back up the data on all of your devices, whether it's your phone or your computer. Always have a backup. Just in case you drop it into an acid pit. Exactly. And now back to our regularly scheduled program. So now Michael gets on the horn with Devin, and he says, hey, I need you to call all the original designers back in who built KITT, and we got to rebuild him. At Bonnie's request. Yes. So they get the original design people back, and you see KITT in the in the bay, and they're just getting started, and they do a little montage. What's a montage? What is a montage, you ask? So a montage is where there's music playing, and they just kind of go from scene to scene. They usually do this for things that take a lot of time. So, yes. Like they had the music playing, and then Michael was kind of standing in the back where there was like a little chassis and a steering wheel on like a stand, and Michael was standing there kind of like reminiscing about when he and KITT were driving around and jumping through stuff and whatnot. He was kind of thinking back on some of his favorite moments. Oh yes, I remember. That's a montage. So running through walls. Exactly. And anytime, usually whenever they need to cover a lot of information in like a 30-second or 45-second period, they'll do a montage. And there's usually no speaking during that part. It's just kind of like scene after scene after scene with music. But, and I found it annoying that Michael kept interrupting and going, "How's it going?" Like as if it was going to be done in like 20 minutes. Are we there yet? Yeah. It's like, I'm sorry, Bonnie is not baking a pizza. She's rebuilding a computerized car. Let's actually talk about rebuilding this car. How long did it actually take? Was this actually one day, or is the episode spanning a week or two? That's a great question, that's a really great question, because there really is there's no reference of time here. Like I would say that if I had to guess, it appeared like the episode, when it comes to like Birock and his like acid pit stuff, that seemed to be like 3 days. But when it comes to like rebuilding KITT and all that could have been that. I don't think that could have been 3 days. No, that was like a week or two, and there was some sleep involved because he went to sleep for a couple hours. It had to be, yeah. I mean, so one thing that this episode really did not have continuity with is time. The aspect of time really didn't make any sense for this episode. So kind of that's a good call out. Cool. So, and one thing I want to point out in this scene where Michael is kind of reminiscing, and then Bonnie comes in and they have a little exchange there. But Michael says something that I think really hits home, and it's kind of the core of the episode here. And Michael says it's amazing because sometimes we take people for granted, and he says to her, "I've forgotten how good you really are." And it's very true because it's like sometimes we take the people that we have for granted. And it's like there's always that saying, you don't know what you have until you lose it. And it's like for this brief period of time, Michael does not have KITT. KITT's completely gone. KITT's destroyed. And that's why Michael was thinking back to those times where he was able to do things that he never could previously do, but he could do them thanks to KITT. And, he's now counting on Bonnie to bring that capability back. And from a technological standpoint, it's such a big endeavor and such a big undertaking, that Bonnie leading this team of scientists are the only ones that can do it. And I thought that was a pretty nice moment.
She's such a good mechanic.
She's a technician. I think she's reached higher than the mechanic level.
Oh, let's talk about the repair.
Okay.
Because that was amazing. And me having a technical background,
sure,
seeing the repair in action,
yeah,
where they're rebuilding, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
It's a repair. Yeah.
And meanwhile, this is all going on throughout some other things that happen, so we're going to kind of go back and forth between those. But yeah, so what did you think about the repair process?
You see all those wires just kind of going into the main, the cabin. What do you call it?
Into the cabin.
Yeah,
into the KITT's cabin.
Yeah, you see all these wires, and the wires are actually... I don't remember ever seeing a wire like that had built-in LEDs. I mean, you see that now with USB cables.
Right.
They have LED lights that light up.
Yeah. But not along the cable. It's only like at the ends.
Right. And here, it was along the cable, and they kind of had this pattern as if there were like blood flowing into the main cabin.
Right.
Almost kind of like the KITT was on bypass as they were trying to do surgery on him.
There's a word for they were doing a lot of what's called anthropomorphosis. Yeah, okay, it's a really ridiculous word. So there's a word called anthropomorphism or anthropomorphosis. I think it is. I may be mispronouncing it horribly, and I apologize. Are you familiar with this word?
No.
Okay. So I had to look it up, but the word is when you basically assign attributes of a living thing to an inanimate object.
KITT's very much a lively thing.
KITT is not a creature. He's a machine. This gets into a whole, philosophical discussion that I think would make this a 9-hour podcast. But, for all intents and purposes, KITT is a machine. He's a very advanced machine. He's an artificially intelligent machine. He is, and I would say, would you say he's sentient?
Yes.
Okay. But anthropomorphism is taking living attributes and putting them on an inanimate object. So they were treating KITT like a person. And there was a brief time where KITT was kind of barely able to talk, and Michael came in to see him, and he was like, "Hey, buddy, how you feeling?" And KITT barely recognized him, and that kind of reminded me of going to see somebody that had just had a major surgery, and they're kind of groggy and out of it and whatnot, and
hi, Michael.
Yeah, it was, KITT was barely able to talk to him, but it was, you could see even Michael was just emotionally taken by that because he was like, "Oh, hey, there's people want to get back in here and make you whole again, and I can't wait to see you." And but you could see Michael was getting emotional at that.
Goodbye.
Yeah, that was a tough scene too. But so let's see. So while all this is happening, while the repair's going on, Michael was over at the foundation looking at some of the pictures that photographer lady had shot, and she was kind of telling him about how she had been in contact with or she had been affected by one of Birock's acid pits back in New York before she moved to California. And she was taking pictures of that as well. And, she said that that Birock had his office burned down the day before it was going to be investigated by the local, environmental people and so forth. So, Michael said, well, hey, I bet he'll do the same thing if I press him a little bit. So she's like, okay. So next thing we know, the next day we see Birock and some blonde in a mink walking down steps from some office building, and Michael's there and he's like, hey, Birock, I'm on to you. And he's kind of putting the squeeze on him, and like the typical Hasselhoff overacting, but it was, definitely, putting his hand out and putting the squeeze on him for sure, and saying, "Hey, man, I'm gonna get you." And Birock is like, "Hey, don't let the suit fool you. I know how to deal with you people, but basically just saying, "Hey, man, I'm coming for you." So he basically just wanted to scare him, and he definitely did, because later on you can see him coordinating with an arsonist to burn down his place. So everything was going exactly to plan. Michael and photographer lady were kind of predicting he was going to do this to cover his tracks and be able to keep doing his thing with his acid. But meanwhile, while all this crap is happening, KITT is getting better, and KITT's getting ready to be tested.
And his humor is starting to come back too.
Yes. So Michael comes back, and KITT's actually he's conscious. KITT's conscious and talking, and Michael's like, "Hey, man, you're sounding great," and KITT's like, "Hey, KITT says, "Hey, I'm gonna have a road test in the track in a couple minutes. Are you gonna be there?" And Michael's like, "I will not miss that for the world." And what can you tell us about that road test?
Oh my goodness, it was horrendous. To KITT standards,
Right?
Like me driving, that was already very fast.
Yeah.
So apparently 100 miles per hour in that maze is normal.
Right. Which you and I know 100 miles an hour is extremely fast. And I mean, I don't think anybody could maneuver that at 100 miles an hour. So that little bit of dialogue, I think, was kind of far-fetched. But, Michael could tell that KITT was operating far below his potential. And here's more of that anthropomorphism. This is more of that anthropomorphism. I should just stop trying to say that. But it's because the scientists were saying, "Oh, well, KITT's been hurt. Now he's not going to want to be hurt again. He's going to try to protect himself and not put himself in danger again. And he's wounded. Blah blah blah. They're treating him like a person with, traumatized by something, whereas KITT is a machine, so like a machine should do what it's been told to do, right?
There are exceptions to the rules
in the Knight Rider realm,
because KITT has understood human human
characteristics.
Sure. He knows he can feel things.
Well, can he feel things, or are they just programs? I guess it's kind of like Data on Star Trek. Data didn't have feelings, but he could behave in a way that would be equivalent to feelings.
He's artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence can learn feelings.
That could be another, physiological question for the 9-hour version of our podcast. Are they real feelings, or are they just actions that are equivalent to what's felt by a person with feelings? You know what I mean?
I wouldn't say human feelings, but it is software that's been programmed to think like a human thinks.
Right. Okay, that's fair enough. So, so the scientists are like, well, hey, we recommend he be reclassified for light duty or recreational vehicle. And Michael's like, no, you're not turning him into a golf cart. Which I would think a golf cart with artificial intelligence and the ability to turbo boost would still be badass on the golf course. But KITT is far better than that.
Absolutely.
So at this point, Michael says, well, you know what, doctors, scientists, thank you for what you've done. The work is now in our, the ball is now in our court. And, Michael says to KITT, we're going to take you back to the bay, get you all back in shape, and we're going to run this.
Purdy.
We're going to run this course until you get it right. And, it was almost like he's retraining an athlete that's, I guess, has to go back into training after like a major traumatic event or something. We're going to keep doing it until we get it right. And, we're going to kind of bring you back we're going to resurrect you from the pits. And then KITT's like, all right.
You mean acid pits?
Exactly. Yeah, see? You're paying attention. Then there was another montage, and this time Michael and Bonnie are the ones doing the work, and the scientists are kind of standing off in the corner going, nah, it's not going to work. Like, you could tell during all the music was playing, the scientists are watching, and they're just shaking their heads. They're just like, they're probably like, I don't even know why we're still here.
Yeah, but then they start doing these facial expressions like, oh?
Yeah.
Oh.
They were starting to develop a little bit of faith in the process. But so finally, a little bit later on, Michael and KITT are back out on the track. This time, all is well. And Michael is like, woo! He's having a blast of a time, knocking out all the turns at 100 miles an hour, which physically impossible. But and now for reenactment, Maurice. And then the final test is to ram through a big concrete wall. So that's what happened right before they would have ran through the concrete wall. KITT stopped them within inches of going through the wall, and Michael said, "Hey, why did you stop?" And KITT says, "Well,
KITT says, I wanted to test my braking system."
Oh, that's not what he said. No, he said, "At this stage of my recovery, I don't think it's safe for us to go through there." Michael said, "Hey, we would have gone through that like shaving cream." And you can see KITT's doubting himself right here, which is, interestingly enough, aligning with what that other scientist was saying, or the scientist could have programmed him to do that, But and then Michael says, "Well, hey, we gotta go because Birock is gonna make his move." Oh, and photographer lady got back. She had some pictures, incriminating pictures, more pictures of Birock. So Michael's like, "Okay, he's gonna make his move. We got to get over there." KITT's like, "I don't think I'm ready." Michael's like, "Look, we're ready. We're going. We're doing this." So they head over to Birock's dump site, and I found this ridiculous. There's a commercial break, and then as soon as we get back from the commercial, we're at the dump site, and then the camera's panning around. There's the acid pit. There's the bottle. There's the things of hazardous waste. Then there's a hill with shrubs on it, and Michael is parked behind the shrubs. Like
he parked there in silent mode.
Of course, but the shrubs were just so out of place on the this hill right in the middle with shrubs, and there's Michael behind it. I mean, it's so obvious, of any place anyone's going to hide to stake out this place, it's going to be on this shrub hill right in the middle of it all. I found that a little ridiculous. But he's sitting there with KITT, and they're just kind of watching things happen, and Birock shows up, and he starts throwing his documents all over the place because they know he's going to torch it. And Michael and KITT have a little heart-to-heart conversation, which, again, this is something that was just a little odd because, KITT's obviously hesitating to do a lot of these things, and Michael tells him a story about how, he had to learn to cope with the trauma of when he was shot in the face. And this is part of the pilot in season 1, episode 1 and 2, about how Michael Knight becomes Michael Knight and everything like that. And he's telling KITT, like, I never got over it. I had to get used to it, and I had to let it not get the better of me, and blah, blah, blah. And then KITT's, like, motivated by this. And KITT's like, "Hey, thanks for telling me that, man. I'm with you. Let's do it." It's like, he's a machine. He's supposed to do what you tell him to do. I just found that conversation weird.
So...
What did you think of that?
So that reminds me a lot of... yes, he's a machine, but it reminds me of RoboCop. I don't know if you ever saw RoboCop, where
I might have once or twice.
Where he was programmed to do certain things, right? And again, it's that self-preservation. The machine has been programmed to self-preserve, right. And with that speech, yeah, it's a little complicated because that's something that only a human would understand.
Exactly. Like. I guess KITT had to relearn his trust for Michael, to allow him to bypass his hesitation or his, programming of hesitation to allow them to go, head first into the battle.
This is how I'll justify that scene, actually. So, yes, KITT's programmed to self-preserve. However, Michael, which KITT is instructed or programmed to listen to
and trust,
has explained to KITT that if you do this action, which may appear to be self-destructive, it actually isn't.
Right.
If you do it the right way. So he has introduced the possibility, whereas, in Machine, it's either a yes or a no.
Right.
He has introduced that there is a yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So it alters because it's a learning machine.
Right.
And it has learned that this action does not result in death. Doing this action can preserve lives too. But the probability may be diminished.
And he's using his existing trust of Michael to go for it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation. So Michael's like, KITT, you ready? And KITT's like, yep, let's do it.
Born ready.
That's right. So they go into silent mode, which I would love to have a silent mode in my car.
Which basically means drive Maurice style. Don't rev the engine past 1,000 RPMs.
That's right. Idle. You idle your engine. But so they sneak up on everything, on everybody, and you basically see the arsonist shows up and starts dousing the place with gasoline, getting it ready to go up in flames, and Michael shuts him off, and they have a little fist fight, and then Acid John Birock shows up driving the very same forklift that dunked KITT originally. And they play a little cat and mouse game in the lot there. And then next thing you know, Acid John is parked right by the acid pit. And then Michael and KITT use KITT to push him in a giant construction size forklift backhoe thing into the acid pit.
Those are some strong tires.
Yeah, strong tires, strong engine, strong everything. That was a little bit much for me. You could not take a Pontiac Trans Am and push a piece of construction equipment like that. That was a little much for me. But it's KITT. I know.
It's KITT.
It's KITT. We suspend that disbelief. He's badass. He can move mountains with his engine. So, he does that. And then Photographer Lady and Bonnie are up on the hill, and Photographer Lady's taking pictures of John Birock on his, standing outside of his. He climbs out of his. The cab of the thing. He's stuck in his acid pit, and they got him red-handed. So it's like, okay, dude, you're done. And that's the end of that. And then the sort of little epilogue is Michael and Photographer Lady, who we now find out her name is Fran. Michael and Fran are inside the semi because it's raining outside, having a little picnic and a little, little date, hanging with KITT over there. And they have a little thing, and then next thing you know, Michael's getting some smooches, and the credits roll.
Is KITT considered the wingman there?
I would think so. And, KITT says something kind of interesting here, which again is adding more sort of human characteristics, because KITT says there was nothing in the article about John Birock that came out after this whole thing happened. There was nothing in the article that mentioned KITT and what he went through and stuff like that. So it's like KITT's looking for some recognition here.
He deserves it.
He deserves it, sure. He totally does. But again, he's a machine looking for recognition.
Maybe he's programmed to be recognized for an action he performs.
Who knows? But the episode ends with Michael getting some smooches.
From 80s lady.
From 80s Photographer Lady.
With her hair all curly and in a bun, 80s style.
Oh, yeah. So what did you think of the episode overall? Did you enjoy the episode?
Honestly, I really enjoyed the episode. I have to say that the repair or the rebuilding of KITT was my favorite, because it just reminds me of, it's almost like surgery. You're in a hospital, you see all these wires going in. It's like, it's like a bypass to his heart or CPU,
Yeah.
and you see all these LEDs like information's flowing into him, you know?
Exactly.
And he's being reborn.
Absolutely. So your highlight was the repair sequence that KITT went through.
Yes, the rebirth of KITT.
Excellent. So my highlight of this episode was, and I like this about a lot of Knight Rider episodes, the smugness of when Michael Knight catches the bad guy in the act, and the bad guy realizes that he's completely screwed, and Michael just has this like, I got you. This smug grin on his face that usually happens towards the end of the episode, and then in this one was no different. Right before the end of the episode, Michael's like, "Well, KITT, I believe this is what they call toxic waste disposal, wouldn't you say?" And KITT's like, "Absolutely." And they're just standing there like all smug and full of themselves. I think that's great. So what would you say what did you like the least about this episode?
The least.
Besides KITT not having a girlfriend.
Devin not being there in person.
Okay. Yeah, and so Devin in the beginning said he hurt his back, so he was stuck back at the foundation building. So yeah, that was kind of a bummer because Devin's fun to have around.
He is
with his tea and crumpets. But for me, what I didn't really like about the episode, and again, this is hard for me because I am such a big fan of Knight Rider, and some of the quality of the in-car video was just way too good for being 1985. I have seen other examples in other episodes where the video quality looked like it should coming off of a CRT inside a mobile installation. And when you have Devin talking to Michael using crystal clear video like that, well, we don't even have that right now in 2016. That's a little much for me. So I'm gonna say that's my dislike of this episode. So that being said, that's gonna take us to the end of our episode here, Maurice. You have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I do have a request though.
Please.
I want to hear that theme song again.
Oh, you will. I promise. And in fact, we're going to play it in a few seconds here, but I just want to say thanks again for tuning in. We appreciate you guys supporting us and subscribing to us. Please follow us. We are also on YouTube. You can get to our YouTube page from our website, tunein-nextweek.tumblr.com. Subscribe to us on YouTube. If we hit 100 people subscribing to us, we can get our own YouTube channel name. So please subscribe to us there. We would appreciate it. And as the name of our podcast implies, and as we would love for you to do, please
tune in next week.